This is the Alma Street engineering report as part of the Robinson Trust Sidewalk Program. At the April 26th council meeting, the council authorized the design to go forward for 9 Robinson sidewalk projects, but the council did not specify which side of the street the sidewalk would be built upon for those projects. They also asked that Public Works prepare an engineering report to look at the pros and the cons for a project on either side of the street. And they asked for DPW to do that report and to make a recommendation. The factors that were to be considered would be whether or not one side rather than the other side has more favorable support from the property owners. One side may have less impact on trees, less grading on private property, that there be no constructability issues such as utility poles that cannot be designed around, connectivity to adjacent sidewalks, trails, schools, parks, shopping areas, or other destinations, and cost. The engineering reports will be provided to council, and they will make a decision which side of the street the sidewalk should be built upon. The format of those reports is that DPW has made a concept design for each side of the street, Concept 1 and Concept 2. And then DPW has performed an analysis of each of those concepts, and we've also made a recommendation. This is the plan for Concept 1. Concept 1 is sidewalk along the even-side addresses of Alma Street Southeast. The sidewalk will extend from the Delano Street Southeast intersection and will connect with the existing sidewalk along Fallen Lane. This concept includes sidewalk and ADA ramps extending across the Alma-Delano intersection and terminating with another ADA ramp near to the dead end of Delano Drive. This will allow a safe route to the Wildwood Park. Also, there is a potential sidewalk project being considered for the north side of Delano Drive Southeast that is separate from this project. First, let's look at the typical section for the Concept 1 of Alma Street. The existing street width is 26 feet from the face of curb to the face of curb. The existing right-of-way is 50 feet. 50 feet of existing right-of-way. So the distance between the existing curb and the right-of-way is 12 feet. The proposed section is for a 4-foot grassed utility strip behind the existing curb, and then a 5-foot concrete sidewalk behind that, which leaves us 2.5 feet of separation between the back of the sidewalk and the right-of-way. Returning to the plan at the intersection of Delano Drive, here is where the project ends with Concept 1. We have an ADA ramp at the intersection. On the opposite side of Delano Drive, there's a receiving ADA ramp, as well as a short connection with another ADA ramp, which would allow a safe access to Wildwood Park. The first property is 610 Alma Street. You can see that there's the sidewalk with the utility strip. There's a new concrete apron. And then we come to the next property, 502. The same section continues. Also, there's a new concrete apron shown at 502. And here we have an existing utility pole, and we have these 2 trees. So let's take a closer look at those areas. So looking at the left side of the drawing, we have photographs of those 2 areas. Okay, here this photo, the lower photo, you can see that this is the intersection of Delano Drive. You can see that there are clear sight lines at the intersection, and also there's a potential sidewalk being considered for this side of Delano Drive, which would connect to the sidewalk. Okay, the photo above shows the proposed 5-foot sidewalk at the next property. Here you can see the existing driveway. There is an existing utility pole with guy anchors, but the proposed sidewalk would be aligned between the back of that pole and the guy anchors. And here again, there's another photo of that location, and the photo to the left shows the two trees that are located in that property. These are two crepe myrtles, a 20-inch and a 14-inch diameter. They're close to the curb, so they'll have to be removed. These two trees are in the town of Vienna right away, and also, as you can see, they're planted directly beneath the utility lines. So they're already growing into the utility lines, and they will continue to be pruned by the utility company. So these two trees will need to be removed with concept 1. Okay, returning back to the plan, let's take a look at that in plan view. These are the cherry trees that are located in front of the frontage of 504. As you can see, they're in the right-of-way. The pink line represents the right-of-way, and those trees would have to be removed. Okay, the next property, 506, there are no trees or landscaping along the frontage, so the sidewalk continues with the utility strip and the 5-foot sidewalk replacement of the driveway. And then next, let's look at property 508, where we have some additional landscaping, which is also located in the right-of-way. So here in these two photographs, we're looking at the frontage of 508 Alma. You can see here are two existing utility poles, and here's the first cherry tree along the frontage of 508. In the picture to the right, you can see that there's a planting bed, and then here's the second Yushina cherry tree. Both are 3-inch diameter Yushina cherry trees. Again, they're both located within the town of Vienna right-of-way. With the design, it's conceivable that we could bring the sidewalk behind the existing pole and in front of the tree and bring it adjacent to the curb, but there would be a significant impact on the trees, especially this first tree. From there, we could continue the sidewalk adjacent to the curb without a utility strip, but still there would be impact to the second tree. So rather than doing that with this concept, Department of Public Works prefers that the tree, the Yushina tree here, and the second tree be transplanted outside of the right-of-way, or that they be removed and replaced with nursery stock. Returning to the plan view, here we have those two cherry trees at 508 that we just talked about in the replacement of the driveway apron. Here at 510 and also 512, the right-of-way is clear of any obstructions, and we continue with the alignment of the sidewalk, which is the 4-foot utility strip and the 5-foot concrete sidewalk. Both concrete aprons at 510 and 512 would be replaced. And then here at the next property, 608, we have the situation of several more trees within the town of Vienna right-of-way, and we also have a utility pole at that location. So let's look at that property frontage in the photographs. In these two photos, we're looking at the frontage of 600 Alma Street. The photo to the right, you can see that there's an existing pole located near to the curb, so the sidewalk has to go behind that. These are magnolia trees. We have three southern magnolias. They are 6 inches, 5 inches, and 6 inches in diameter. And again, they're in the town of Vienna right-of-way. And you can see that they're planted beneath the utility lines. And as they continue to grow, they will be pruned by the utility company. Moving the sidewalk to be adjacent to the curb is not a good option in front of these magnolias, because the magnolias have a shallow root system, and that root system would be impacted by the construction. So because the impact to the tree roots of those magnolias, and because they're underneath the utility lines, the survivability of those trees is not very high. So Public Works believes that these trees should be removed and replaced outside of the right-of-way and away from the utility lines. There is one additional tree that I forgot to mention, and that's the 4-inch diameter European hornbeam, and it's located near the property line of 600 and 602. That's a tree that's small enough that it could be considered for transplantation away from its position in the right-of-way to a position outside of the right-of-way. Returning to the plan and looking at the next properties, here at 602 we continue the section, which is the 4-foot utility strip, 5-foot concrete sidewalk, replacement of the driveway with a new concrete drive apron. There's an existing pole located here between 602 and 604. We'll be able to put the sidewalk behind that utility pole and continue with the sidewalk alignment across the frontage of 604. The trees that are in 604 are far enough back from where the sidewalk is going that they will be preserved during the construction. And then at the driveway of 604, here we bring the sidewalk alignment adjacent to the curb. And the reason for that is there are two trees that are located, I guess, partially on the right-of-way and partially on the property of 606. But those trees could be preserved by bringing the sidewalk adjacent to the curb. So that's what the arborist has recommended, to save those two trees. And we'll look at the photos of those in a second, but I just want to continue in the plan view. At 606, we have a replacement of the concrete drive apron. And then approaching the next property, 608, the corner property, here we have an existing utility pole. So we have to have the sidewalk go behind that utility pole. And then we return to what our typical section is. So that's the 4-foot utility strip with the 5-foot sidewalk. So there's a little bit of a bend or transition. And then the sidewalk extends across this driveway at 608. Sidewalk continues. I believe there's an existing fire hydrant here. The sidewalk continues around the curb return, tying into the existing sidewalk on Folan Lane. There's a new ADA ramp that would be proposed here to replace the existing ramp, which is not according to the current standards. So let's look at the photographs of those 4 properties. The first photograph in the lower part of the plan shows the existing utility pole that's located between 602 and 64. It's located close to the curb so it can be accommodated within the utility strip. We'll be able to get a 5-foot concrete sidewalk behind that. Looking at the next property, 606, there are 2 trees along that frontage, and the first tree is a 6-inch diameter cut leaf Japanese maple, and then the second tree is a 12-inch diameter blue spruce. Both of those trees can be preserved by moving the sidewalk to be adjacent to the existing curb, eliminating the utility strip. So the sidewalk would run against the curb in front of this first tree and then continue in front of the second tree. There might have to be some pruning of these limbs, but the trunk of this tree is located about 12 feet from where the face of curb is. Moving on to the next property. Okay, this photograph is taken from standing in the driveway of 606 looking towards Folan Lane. This is the driveway of 606. In the background is the driveway for 608. Between the 2 properties is located this existing utility pole. It's close to the curb, and then it has a guy anchor with a wire attachment. The proposed sidewalk will go between the guy anchor and the back of the pole. We have enough clearance to get a 4-foot wide sidewalk, allowing for a vertical clearance of 80 inches, which would meet the ADA required standards. During the final design of this project, if this is selected, we can look into having these guy anchors pulled back a little bit to allow more clearance and a wider sidewalk. And we can also look at putting in sidewalk guys, which would also allow for more clearance. The other thing I wanted to point out is this driveway. You can see this driveway has a pretty significant slope in the first couple feet, and then it levels off. This is not a standard town of Vienna driveway, And with this project, Concept 1, we would replace the existing driveway ramps with new concrete driveways according to the new standard. Looking at the next photograph, here what we have is we're standing in 608 just past the driveway, and we're looking towards Folan Lane. Here the sidewalk that we're proposing would have a utility strip, and we'd have the 5-foot sidewalk. We would go behind this existing fire hydrant, and we'd wrap around the curb return to tie into Folan Lane. There's an existing sidewalk at Folan Lane, and we would replace the existing ADA ramp at Folan Lane with a new ADA ramp that meets current standards. And we would likewise replace the receiving ramp on the east side of the Folan Lane Alma Street intersection as well. So this is the first ramp that would be replaced, and this is the second ramp, the receiving ramp, that would also be replaced with new ADA ramps. Now let's look at Concept 2. Concept 2 is sidewalk along the odd side addresses of Alma Street Southeast. Sidewalk will extend from Delano Street Southeast intersection and will connect with the existing sidewalk along Folan Lane. And this concept will include sidewalk and ADA ramps at the Alma-Delano intersection and terminating with another ADA ramp near to the dead end of Delano Drive. This will allow a safe route to the Wildwood Park. There is a potential sidewalk project considered for the north side of Delano Drive Southeast that is separate from this project. For Concept 2, we actually have two typical sections. The first one is the same as what we had under Concept 1, the 26-foot wide existing street, 50-foot right-of-way, a 4-foot grass utility strip, 5-foot concrete sidewalk, which allows 2.5 feet of separation between the right-of-way and the existing curb. That will be used for about half of the block, and then there's a second typical section which is also used. And this is a typical section that can be used in areas of limited right-of-way and to avoid obstacles such as tree impacts. That will be used for about half of the block. In this typical section, again, same 50-foot right-of-way, same 26-foot wide street. But at the back of the existing curb, we'll build a 6-foot concrete sidewalk, no utility strip, and then we'll have approximately 6 feet from the back of the sidewalk to the existing right-of-way. And this, again, this is a section that's to be used only in areas of limited right-of-way and to avoid obstacles and to minimize tree impacts. So looking at the plan view of Concept 2, starting at Delano Drive Southeast, here you can see where we terminate the project with an ADA ramp which will allow for crossing of Alma Street, and then there's a continuation of the sidewalk to a second ADA ramp which will allow access to this dead end area, which would be a safe access to the park. And if we look over to the right, we can see a photograph taken from the curb return of Delano and Alma. Looking towards Wildwood Park, you would see that the sidewalk would be constructed in here, there'd be a ramp, and then you would walk out into this dead end area and walk to the park access there. The next property in plan view is 503. You can see that the sidewalk continues along frontage of 501, and then in front of the frontage of 503, there's a replacement driveway apron for 503, and then the alignment changes in order that we can save an existing tree at 505. So we bring the sidewalk adjacent to the curb, eliminate the utility strip, and go with that 6-foot concrete sidewalk. So let's look at the photographs of the frontage of 505. So here we have the photograph of the tree in front of 505. This is where we would eliminate the utility strip and bring a 6-foot sidewalk adjacent to the curb. So we would be able to save the tree with that alignment. However, there will be a significant impact to the critical root zone of this tree, which is a 20-inch diameter red oak. Returning to the plan view and looking at the next two properties. So here we're leaving 505. We have sidewalk adjacent to the curb. Here's where the sidewalk goes across the driveway. And here we start the utility strip again. 4-foot utility strip, 5-foot concrete sidewalk. replacement of the concrete apron with a new concrete apron, continuation of the 5-foot sidewalk and 4-foot utility strip. There is a tree here located in this hedge. This tree will be preserved. There might be some tree limbs to be trimmed a little bit, but the tree will be preserved. And then the sidewalk continues along the frontage of 509. And then there's another large tree here, which we'll look at in the photograph. Here's a photograph of that first tree, 11-inch Leland cypress located along the frontage of 507. This tree will be preserved. There may be some trimming of the branches required. Now let's look at the next tree. This is the tree in front of 509. It's a 20-inch diameter red maple. At this location, we could move the sidewalk adjacent to the curb and physically get a sidewalk between the existing curb and the tree, but there would be a significant impact to the critical root zone of that tree. Therefore, we recommend removing this tree. Returning to plan view, here's 509, the tree we just talked about that has to be removed. We'll replace the existing driveway with a new concrete apron. Continue the sidewalk along the frontage of 511. Replace the driveway with a new concrete apron. Continue the sidewalk and then replace the driveway at 601 with a new concrete apron. And then here we've got the sidewalk with the utility strip. The sidewalk goes across the driveway apron, but then coming up to the next tree in the frontage of 601, we're going to try to save that tree by bringing the sidewalk adjacent to the curb. So that's the 6-foot sidewalk without the utility strip that goes in front of that tree, continues along the frontage. So continuing along the frontage of 603, there's this first small tree which we can preserve by bringing the sidewalk against the curb. Continuing to the next tree, which is a larger tree, we can physically get the sidewalk in front of that tree and behind the curb, but there will be significant damage to the critical root zones of that tree. And then there's a third tree here, a small tree which is very close to the curb, which we will not be able to preserve. So let's look at those 3 trees in the photographs. So here we're looking at a photograph of the frontage of 603. This is that first tree which is on the south end of the property, and then this is the north end of the property, is that second smaller tree. And then in this photograph, that's the center tree, which is the 26 diameter red maple. So we could bring the sidewalk adjacent to the curb in front of those trees. This first tree could be preserved, that small tree, which is a 6-inch diameter Bradford pear. The second tree, the larger tree, which shows up in this photograph, is a 26 diameter red maple. Physically, we could get the sidewalk in front of that tree. However, there would be a significant impact to the critical root zone of that tree. And then the third tree, which is on the north end of the property, is a 5-inch diameter Bradford pear, which would not be, we could not save that tree because of the alignment of the sidewalk. It would have to be removed. Returning to the plan view, we have a replacement driveway at 603. Sidewalk goes across that driveway. And here we transition from sidewalk against the curb to having a utility strip and the 5-foot sidewalk. There's a small tree here in the frontage of 605. It's on the town right away. And that would not be a tree that we could preserve with this alignment. And then we have a replacement driveway here at 605. The sidewalk goes across the driveway here. And then we return to having the sidewalk adjacent to the curb. We're going to try to save the existing tree, which is in the frontage of 607. So let's look at those photographs. So in these 2 photographs, we're first looking at the 6-inch red maple at 605. You can see it's fairly close to the curb. It's in the town of Vienna right away. The concept includes the utility strip. So this This tree will have to be removed. If we move the sidewalk adjacent to the curb, I think there would still be a very significant impact on that tree. So I'm not sure if it would survive even if we did that. Looking at the next tree, which is the 20-inch red maple at 607. Here you can see that tree, and here we have the sidewalk adjacent to the curb. We're trying to save that tree. But it is a large tree and it has a large critical root zone, so there will be a significant impact on the roots of the 20-inch red maple. So returning to plan view, here's the 20-inch red maple that I just spoke of in front of 607. Sidewalk is adjacent to the curb. Here's a replacement concrete driveway. The sidewalk goes across that driveway. And here is the corner property, 609. Sidewalk is adjacent to the curb. Sidewalk goes across the replacement concrete driveway. And we're going to continue that section of the sidewalk adjacent to the curb to try to minimize impact on the 3 trees that are coming up. And we'll continue around the curb return, and we'll construct a new ADA ramp, continue with sidewalk to tie in with existing sidewalk on Folan Lane. Also, on the opposite side of the street, on the opposite side of Alma, we'll build a receiving ramp, ADA ramp, where there's an existing ramp, but it's not to current standards. So that will allow for a crossing of Alma at Folan Lane. And now we'll look at the 2 photographs here to the right side of 609. So these are the 3 trees in front of 609. It's a 7-inch diameter crepe myrtle, 8-inch diameter crepe myrtle, and in the background is a 10-inch diameter grafted weeping cherry. And these trees would be preserved by moving the sidewalk adjacent to the curb as we have in the design. And the photograph above is the photograph taken looking across Alma Street from where the handicap ramp, the new ramp will be placed, and the receiving ramp will be placed across Alma Street on Folan Lane. I did want to mention something about the existing driveways. The existing driveway at this location is like an old style driveway. It has a real abrupt transition coming off of the roadway, and those will be replaced with new concrete driveway aprons. And here on the left is a photograph of that existing driveway. You can see there's a pretty significant slope on the front portion of that driveway. So that's the description of concept 2. Before moving on to the analysis, there's one more drawing I'd like to look at, and that's a drawing that shows the critical root zone of the trees on Alma Street. This is a drawing that shows concept 1 and concept 2. It highlights the trees that were inventoried by the arborist, and it also designates the critical root zone. So most of the tree roots are in the top 18 inches of the soil. And depending on the diameter of the tree is how you determine the extent of the critical root zone. For example, if you have a 20-inch diameter tree, the arborists approximate that the critical root zone extends 20 feet radially from the trunk of that tree. So this is a way that that arborists can compare the critical root zone to the construction to determine the impact to the tree. So on the plan, here you can see this tree, which happens to be a 22-inch red oak. The red circle that goes around it is the plot of the critical root zone. For this 22-inch tree, the radius of this circle, critical root zone, is a 22-foot radius. Likewise, for this tree up here, same thing. You have a 20-inch red oak, critical root zone, that's a 20-foot radius around that tree. There's some other information on this drawing. For example, there's a species, and then underneath that in parentheses, it's indication of whether the tree is on private property, in this case 609 Alma, it's on private property. Whereas, let's see, this other tree here, let's say the 20-inch crepe myrtle, this one is on Town of Vienna right away, and it's noted there. Just at a distance, you can see that the larger trees, the larger critical root zones, appear to be on this concept 2 side. So although we have more tree removals on concept 1, they're the smaller trees, and most of them are also in town of Vienna right away. There is impact to the larger trees on the concept 2 side because those are the ones with the larger critical root zones. Now we'll look at part 3 of this engineering report, which is the analysis of concepts 1 and concepts 2. Concept 1 is a sidewalk along the even side addresses of Alma Street Southeast, and concept 2 is a sidewalk along the odd side of Alma Street Southeast. Based upon the questionnaire that DPW sent to the homeowners late last year, the even side of Alma Street had more supporters of sidewalk. The even side addresses responded to the questionnaire with 4 in favor and 1 not in favor. The odd side addresses responded with 3 in favor and 1 not in favor. Analysis of the tree impacts for concept 1. Construction of this concept requires removal of 6 trees with an additional 3 trees that could be transplanted. The trees to be removed are the 20-inch and 40-inch diameter crepe myrtles on the frontage of 504, the 6-inch, 5-inch, and 6-inch diameter southern magnolias, the 4-inch cedar, the frontage of 600. The trees that could be transplanted to another location are the 2 3-inch diameter Yoshino cherries, frontage of 508, and the 4-inch diameter European hornbeam, frontage of 600. All of these trees to be removed or transplanted are within the town of Vienna right-of-way. Additionally, they are located beneath the utility lines. As these trees grow larger, they will be subject to pruning by the utility companies. Regarding the tree impacts for concept 2. This concept has significant tree impact. The concept recommends removal of the 20-inch diameter red maple at the right-of-way line of 601 Alma and one of the 5-inch diameter Bradford pears at the frontage of 603. Though concept 2 requires only 2 tree removals, there are significant impacts to the large remaining trees. These trees may be far enough from the curb that the sidewalk can clear the tree, but the construction will damage a significant portion of the critical root zone of the trees. The 22-inch red oak at 505 Alma Street will lose approximately 29% of its critical root zone. The 18-inch red maple at 601 Alma will lose approximately 41% of its critical root zone. The 26-inch red maple, frontage of 603, will lose approximately 50% of its critical root zone. And the 20% red maple and the 20-inch red maple at 607 Alma will lose approximately 28% of its critical root zone. The older trees will be impacted in 2 ways. First, the structural root zone, generally calculated by arborists as half the diameter of the critical root zone, will be disrupted, which may cause trees, the older, larger trees, to become unstable. Second, the older trees generally are more affected and do not respond as well when there's heavy intrusion into their critical root zones. Next, looking at the impacts on vegetation other than trees. For both concepts, there are other plants and vegetation that may be affected by the construction, but this analysis focuses more on potential construction impacts to the larger trees. If either concept is pursued, the vegetation and mitigation measures to protect that vegetation or transplantation or replacement will be addressed in the final design. Next, we'll look at the grading impacts of the 2 concepts. For concept 1, the area where sidewalk would be built is relatively flat, with the grade difference between the existing curb and the back of the right-of-way being less than 1 foot. The grading appears to be minimal. Construction limits for all properties will be determined during later stages of design if this concept is pursued. Regarding the grading impacts under concept 2, there appears to be minimal grading for the concept overall. The area where sidewalk will be built is relatively flat, with the grade difference between existing curb and back of right-of-way being less than 1 foot. At the corner of 501 Alma, the corner property, there will be slightly more grading as this property is a few feet higher than the road. The construction limits for all properties will be determined during later stages of design if this concept is pursued. Regarding the constructability issues, first, for concept 1, there does not appear to be constructability issues with this concept. The areas of the utility poles, the section will be built with the utility pole within the utility strip. At the pole location in front of 600 Alma, the section may be narrower as required to allow clearance horizontal and vertical for the guy anchor and wire. If this design is built, the guidelines could be modified or moved to allow more clearance. In all areas, the sidewalk is wide enough to comply with the ADA required minimum width of 4 feet. Existing water meters will be relocated to the utility strip as necessary. Regarding constructability issues with concept 2, there does not appear to be constructability issues with this concept. There is a segment of fencing that's been installed in the town right-of-way in front of 609 that would need to be modified if this concept is pursued. Existing water meters will be relocated to the utility strip as necessary. Next, regarding cost. For both concepts, the costs are comparable to other Robinson sidewalk projects, and both concepts are relatively similar to each other in terms of cost. Next, regarding connectivity. The East Side concept, concept 2, has more connectivity to the park. However, Alma is not a through street at either Fulton or Delano. The connectivity advantage is only realized by those living on the east side of Alma. A potential sidewalk project for Delano Drive will be considered by the council late this year or early 2022. Both concepts are comparable in terms of connectivity. Finally, in consideration of these factors, and especially because of the significant tree impact to large, mature trees that would occur with Concept 2, Department of Public Works recommends Concept 1.